Hey, everybody out there in internet radio land. You're tuned in to Kana's Corner only on 91.8 The Fan, and I'm here with a very special guest. Would special guests like to introduce themselves?
Happy to, Jackie. Scott Simpson here, voice actor, played the role of Keiichi in the five-part OVA series of Oh My Goddess.
I'll be honest, as soon as I started talking to you, I could hear it.
He's in there. Scott Houle, the director of that show, was constantly working on me to lift my pitch a little bit, bring a little more youth to it. I was in my early 30s when I played Keiichi, so significantly older than the part itself. But I've always had a kind of a high pitched voice, which lends itself to playing younger parts, and in anime at least, live action, I can't quite do that as believably as I once did. But that was one thing that we were always working on, was trying to bring Keiichi's pitch up a little bit, bring a little more youth and naivete into that voice, and it's all still in there. I'm a little grayer than I was then, but it's kind of nice to be able to touch back in with that a dear young fellow, and it's a great comfort to me to think that somewhere down in there he's still working, still in there.
Well, it's actually, as I said to Juliet yesterday, this is kind of a weird thing for me because my first ever DVD that I owned of anime was Oh My Goddess.
Wow.
And
wow.
So, at the time, back then, anime wasn't so widely available, and you'd watch the same DVD over and over and over again because that's all you had.
Yeah.
And now, did you ever think that anime would sort of come through this boom that it has?
We were present to sort of watch that boom emerge, and I can remember going to the first convention we ever went to. It was a small convention in Virginia. And if there were 150 people there, I didn't see them all at one place at one time. And, certainly in those days, being the English voice actor for a series as beloved as Oh My Goddess in the subtitled version already was, there was a little bit of an awkwardness about that. And, you were keenly aware there was much more emphasis on the original language production and the subtitle than there was on any English language adaptation. So we were there and sort of in the beginning, and people were kind of sort of scratching their heads, not sure what to make of us and not sure what to make of English dubs of anime in general. And, frankly, there was a huge range of quality already, and there still is, to be honest. But you could see how it was just on the verge of taking off and how it was going to be as large as it was then, it was going to get much, much, much bigger. And we watched over the course of those next few years as the attendance at conventions just went through the roof. I mean, the next year you went to the same convention. What had been a convention of maybe 200 people was suddenly a convention of 2,000 people. And it literally occurred overnight. And we watched as the people who were watching anime, initially it was mostly, young teenage guys, and we watched as more and more girls came in and started really appreciating that style, that genre. And then suddenly it wasn't just young people; it was, people in their 20s, their 30s, even into their 40s. It was just really fascinating to watch a new market sort of emerge and to play some small role in sort of pushing that material over from a niche market into more of a mainstream market. It's a very exciting thing to watch happen.
Well, it definitely seems to me as more time goes on, there's getting more and more older anime fans because they grew up with it, like Sailor Moon and Pokemon.
Right. And it's one of the nice things about anime that as you mature, there's such an incredible range of styles and of material out there within the genre heading that as you get older and as your tastes and interests mature, the material sort of keeps pace with you. You find that there's stuff out there that continues to appeal to your increasingly maturing sensibilities. There's as much diversity within Japanese animation as there is within the broader American film industry. So, whatever your sort of stage you're at, whatever kind of mindset you kind of bring to it, you're going to find some kind of material out there that really speaks to you. I think that's one of the great strengths of anime, is just the incredible range and diversity of the material within that heading.
Exactly. And you actually mentioned that you started noticing more girls as you progressed through the years, becoming fans of Oh My Goddess. In the beginning, was it just a bunch of, the normal stereotypical sweaty geeks? Or...
Yeah, there was a good representation of the sort of the classic idea one has of a fanboy, but a lot of the jokes that were kind of bandied about in the early days, you kind of quickly had to sort of let go of because very quickly it just became it was not reflective of who was out there watching the material, and in particular for a title like Goddess that's just so sweet and so romantic and it's just kind of harmless. And even when it gets a little bit on the racy side, like say in the third episode of the OVA, where you finally meet Beldandi's older sister Erd, and it gets a little on the second episode rather, it gets a little more on the racy side, but still it's just so sweet and so pure in a way that you could see how you know young people, and in particular maybe young girls, would be drawn to this material. I guess shojo is generally a good sort of classification for this type of anime, and certainly that's in the original culture in which it's presented. That's very much the target audience for this material. It's very much intended specifically for uh, young females, and I guess it took a little while for that to sort of catch on here in the States, but once it has, wow, I think you go to anime conventions now, that's really the majority of who you see there. Much, I think, to the great happiness of the this more stereotypical idea of the anime fanboy, who was delighted to suddenly see all these, beautiful, vibrant young women bouncing around, and very much in a similar kind of appreciation for this material that they were so, enamored with. So, yeah, it was really fascinating to watch that those demographics expand, to watch it become a much more egalitarian material, much more of greater appeal to young men and young women, and then, as you said, uh, more appeal to people as they got older as well. Just a fascinating thing to watch unfold, to watch these demographics expand.
And it's funny because I think a lot of that is due to cosplay as well that attracts so many girls. I can vouch for that on my own.
That's some of the best theater I've ever seen in my life, is going to the costume contests and watching the cosplays. If the caliber of the performance itself is perhaps somewhat on the avocational side, the passion and the commitment people brought to it, I've directed theater my whole life. You wish you could bring some of that enthusiasm sometimes to actors doing stage plays. You just think, wow, I wish I could just take some of that drive and that commitment that cosplayers have, and translate that into a more traditional theater sense. It would be a great thing for just about any play to have that same degree of commitment to the material.
You can just do your auditions at conventions now.
I'm all for it, or on the internet, or whatever works for people, by all means.
But you did mention that Erd scene, which is hilarious because I showed, I think, about a week ago that to our editor-in-chief, Zach. And I was trying to, I don't know if you watch any current anime, but I was trying to show him the comparison between, in the 90s, this is what was sort of considered ecchi or, perverted. And then today you have panty shot, cleavage, panty shot, cleavage. So I was trying to show him the contrast. And have you noticed that throughout the years?
Sure. I think that, again, that's a reaction to the fact that creators, storytellers, writers, and artists in Japan, they know that their audience is getting older as well, and that, there's no better way to keep a large part of that aging demographic happy than to blue it up a little bit more. But it really is a stark contrast when you go back and you look at Goddess in that second episode, and you think, wow, this was kind of kind of racy for the time. But in retrospect, it just seems so um, tame, so innocent in a way. There's something about sort of a recurring theme, I think, throughout Goddess, is that Keiichi is moving from an adolescent to a post-adolescent psychology. I don't want to get too over the top with any intellectual analysis of what's in essence just kind of a good, rollicking, fun story, but nonetheless, Keiichi is growing up, and we see that sort of happen to him. And part of coming to that growing up is coming into an awareness of your own sexual nature, your own vitality. You're coming into the age where you start thinking about how nice it would be to have a beautiful girl on your arm and to move through life with a partner and maybe start a family. And really all of that kind of that the racier content is just a preface to the beginning of Keiichi forming his own family unit. That's really what we see happen. He kind of identifies himself with Beldandi. She brings in a family, and so it's that merging of the one family with another family to create a new unit that is a synthesis of these two groups. And that's what we really see happen is that synthesis occurring, that merging together occurring. So, right at the heart of the storyline, I think it's sort of logical to see why in the second episode it does go a little more into a little more racier content. But then, very quickly that sort of settles into a balance. It's much more about family than it is about, Keiichi and his sexual exploits, which are really pretty minimal.
Poor guy. I think we'll be going to a short break really quick, but when we come back, we'll continue the interview. So don't worry, stay tuned to 91.8 The Fan. Everything you want to hear and nothing you don't. 918thefan.com. Have you logged on today?
Who, me? No. No?
iStock's daily news show, video reviews, articles, forms, in an anime directory. Don't get left behind. Log in today. Only on
918thefan.com?
918thefan.com.
All right, 918thefan.com.
Hey, we're back to Kana's Corner. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. They're always fun. You only get that with live radio. But I did want to ask before we were cut off. I asked this to Juliet yesterday, and to me, it's always seemed like in Oh My Goddess, there was so much chemistry between you two. And you really, I don't feel you get that as often in newer anime, in my personal opinion. But did you think knowing each other helped, make sort of a chemistry between two fictional characters?
Oh, absolutely. Juliet and I had done a lot of theater together by the time we came to Goddess, and had been obviously in a relationship together for a long time as well. There was a sort of an interesting thing that occurred in the casting for that. Scott Houle didn't know we were a couple, didn't know we even knew one another. We were brought in and auditioned separately, and he said, the way that this is often assembled technically is that one actor will be in the studio completely by themselves, and maybe another actor in the scene with you that you're recording has already come in and done their part, sometimes not yet. So this is assembled in very much what we call a looping style, ADR, dialogue replacement, where it's really just you in the studio with a director playing to the monitor, playing to picture. And despite the fact that we were not in the room together, we'd been working together at home together on it and looking at the preview tape that Scott Houle had provided for us ahead of the audition, reading the script, doing a little research. It wasn't quite as easy to do research then. We didn't all have internet access at home in the mid-early 90s. So it was a little trickier to find as much information as you can sort of readily find now, but we were aware that there was this great history with the show, that it was very popular, that these characters in particular were beloved. And we just, in the process of getting ready for the auditions, fell in love with these parts. And so the fact that we had worked together so many years, the fact that we were doing our homework together, the fact that we both kind of immediately fell in love with these characters, all of that, I think, lent itself to what we then did when we went in and auditioned separately. And when Scott Houle played our auditions together, he heard all of that sort of in that. And it's to his credit, he's just such a great director and he has such a great ear. He heard all of that in really pretty rough auditions and called, I think, me first to say, I'd like to offer you the part of Keiichi. And then he said, well, I'm really excited that you're accepting the part, and I've got to get off the phone, and I've got to turn around, and I've got to call Juliet now and let her know that I'm offering her the role of Beldandi. And I said, well, she's actually standing right here beside me if you want to talk to her. And then he looked down for the first time, realized we had the same phone number. That was the first time he realized that, how clever I think he was in the casting choices he made. So, we were able to bring a lot of our passion and our deep love and familiarity with one another into these parts. And then it's just the fact that, how can you not just love these two people? I mean, they're just extraordinary characters, both of them. Keiichi, certainly not as aware as Belldandy is, but every bit as dear and endearing a part. The two of them together are just such a great combination, and it's the kind of people that you kind of like to know. You'd like to be able to say, "Oh, they're friends of mine," and I think that's how people who really become devotees of this series or any series. Really, it's because the characters you identify with to the point of just feeling like they're part of your life, and so it's hard to imagine now for me a life that doesn't include Belldandy, doesn't include Keiichi. They're just such fine human beings, and I feel really lucky to be able to think of them as good friends of mine.
I'll be honest, the romantic in me is kind of like, that's adorable, because it's sort of a fanatic dream, I guess you could say. Those who want to be voice actors and somehow, end up becoming a couple too. I just think, that's amazing that you were able to do that even for just one anime.
Yeah, and then we got to do that again on a few others as well. It was just such a Coastal recording. It was then called Coastal, and it's now called Phoenix, but Scott Houle is the director there and still is. And I just can't say enough of it. If people really appreciate those 5-part series, the OVAs of Oh My Goddess, it's great to get kudos as an actor for the work we did. And certainly Fujishima-san deserves a huge amount of credit for what he did initially. But I just can't emphasize enough how important what Scott Houle does, the process that he created really from scratch to create all of his original adaptations out of Coastal Studios. It's really to his credit that this material was treated with the reverence that it was, with the respect that it was. Scott is the first one to say, look, our job here is not to be translators, it's to be adapters. Our first loyalty should not be to the literal translation from the Japanese, but more important, our fidelity should be to the spirit and the intention of the story, of the storyteller. And I think that comes across in everything he does. We just fell in love with the process that Scott Houle had crafted for doing this work, for adapting Japanese animation for an English-speaking market. And what started with Goddess for him went on to a number of different series, and several of those, Juliet and I were able to work together in roles that were very intimate with one another. Some of them positive, at least one of them actually in a very negative light. Blue Submarine 6, we played a couple together. We were kind of the bad guys. I was the heavy of the story, or one of the heavies, and she was a person of character of questionable loyalty. Her loyalty is to the bad guys initially, and then kind of gets sort of muddied and becomes more loyal to the good guys by the end. But we were kind of the anti-Belldandy and Keiichi in that series. So we got this opportunity to work together closely with Scott Houle over a number of titles. It was just an incredibly satisfying experience. Some of the most satisfying work that either one of us, I would say, have done as actors in any medium.
Now, I'm sad to say that the only two that I know where you guys started it both together were Oh My Goddess and Legend of the Last Labyrinth, because those are the only two I own, sadly.
That's right, and those would be the two main roles in terms of playing couples. Those would be the two roles. But there were a lot of anime titles out of Coastal that Juliet was a lead in, and I played supporting roles in, or vice versa. Maybe a dozen titles, and I'll embarrass myself. And some of them I probably couldn't even remember the titles to right now. But there were a lot of opportunities to work together in those days, and this was primarily from Goddess on for the next about 5 years straight. We were able to work together on those titles, and a lot of times when I'd be playing a part, Shinesman is another one out of Coastal that Juliet and I play eventually a couple. A hysterical show, a total parody of anime as a genre, and sort of a parody of our traditional roles as sort of young, naive, and in love people. That was great fun to do. And then we got to travel the anime circuit for about a 10-year period regularly, going to numerous conventions every year, and primarily there people were wanting to talk about Belldandy and Keiichi. Let me rephrase that. Primarily people were wanting to talk about Belldandy.
Oh.
But you kind of expect that when you're the guy in a magical girl series. Your job is to sort of to put the focus on the girl, And that's something I was always very happy to do, and very happy to do that at conventions as well. People would say, "Isn't that Keiichi?" And somebody would say, "Who?" "Oh, the guy standing by Belldandy." So
Oh.
you were kind of, I don't want to say an afterthought, but you were very, it was always very clear that the job was to be a support player to what she was doing. And that's something that I just loved getting the chance to do, both in the work to do the dubbing itself, but then also in terms of talking about and supporting that and supporting the fans of that by going to conventions as well. One of the great honors of my life to this day as an actor has been the opportunity to help to promote this material and to promote characters like Keiichi, but then to promote characters like Belldandy as well.
Well, in your, respects and whatnot, without Keiichi's goofy wish, you wouldn't have Belldandy.
It's true, and I think it's a whole lot easier for most of us to identify with Keiichi than, with Belldandy. I always said I was a perfect choice for Keiichi because I was a techno geek with an unrealistically attractive girlfriend. And I always felt like, well, that's me. There's no reason why a guy like me should be with somebody as beautiful as Juliet. So I always sort of appreciated that aspect of Keiichi's character. But there's also just this incredible humanity of that part. He's a little on the naive side, but it's certainly, he's not naive about what it means to be a good person. And he learns, I think, as he goes through the story, as we all do through our lives, more what it means to be a good person. But there's this essence, this core of something just really precious, just really dear about Keiichi. I think he's just one of the most excellent, admirable people that I've ever had the opportunity to play. And yeah, he's goofy, and that the part of it is a lot of fun to get to play. The kind of over-the-top goofiness of the part is just something that's a lot of fun to get to do as an actor. The emotion of anime, I've always said the best thing I can compare it to is opera, because the scale of the emotions is huge. It's all epic. Even when you take a story that's really meant for as young an audience as Goddess is, the emotional height that these characters go through is just epic. It's operatic in its scale. And, there's a kind of a liberation that comes with getting to play those emotions. By the time you get to the fourth and the fifth episodes of the OVA series, what Keiichi is going through emotionally is as complex as anything in Shakespeare. It's as huge as anything in, Wagnerian opera. It's just massive in scale what this young man is going through, what he's experiencing. Here you have found the love of your life, only to have it now taken away from you, and then to discover, well, no, actually, this was not something you just discovered. It's something that you actually had at this early part of your life, and had the memory of that taken from you. What a tragedy that is, It's better to have loved and lost, but only if you remember having loved, and if you don't remember the loss. I just have always thought that was such an incredibly powerful, dramatic device, plot device. The fact that they found one another as children, and yet the memory of that was denied Keiichi until he then came to a post-adolescent part of his life. And then here she comes back into his life, and then just the sheer power of that love reawakens that memory. That memory is so powerful that it cannot remain dormant. It will emerge. It is inevitable that it re-emerge, and you see that happen. It's just an incredible emotional roller coaster ride, in particular those last two episodes.
Well, I'm sure it definitely helps that both of the characters are really sympathetic. You feel for them. It's even if you're whether a teenager or you're a little bit older, you're going to, want to get that good ending out of there.
Yeah, you do. It's such a great payoff, the end. Fujishima-san is just so generous as a storyteller. I think he understands in a universal way what audiences need. He obviously has an incredibly relevant and continues to have incredibly relevant things to say about his own culture. But one of the great things about Goddess, is that it's so multicultural right off the bat. I mean, here he is dipping into ancient Norse mythology for the inspiration for these characters. So he's looking further afield than his own culture for the references from which the story is kind of drawn from, and for the symbolic content that the story is drawn from. So I think he's coming from a kind of a global perspective right off the bat. And I think he elicits these global, universal qualities in all of the characters. You could do a stock translation of any anime script, and just word for word, a lot of it would not be sensible to an English speaking audience. A lot of the Japanese language is, built of idioms that are very culturally specific, but which, when literally translated to English, don't really mean anything. I think you could turn the volume down, ignore all subtitles and scripts, and I think you could just watch it with music maybe, and you could get a really strong sense of what's going on, because these characters are so identifiable to us. They are so human in a universal, in a global sense, beyond just in a specifically Japanese cultural sense. So that makes our job as actors much easier when you're starting off with a character that is just that likable, that is just that endearing. Half your job is done. It really is. And I always say that with anime, really, our job as voice actors is simply to provide a vocal component that supports the physical performance that the animators and the writers and the directors have already given. In other words, the creators over in Japan, the ones who actually wrote the story, drew each one of those cells, they are really the actors who are giving the physical performance. That physical performance, by the time we as voice actors, even in Japan, the original voice actors, by the time they provide what they do for it, that physical performance is already there. It's done. And our job is really to provide a vocal element that supports that physical performance. So in a way, I always say that anime acting is egoless acting, because it doesn't really matter what your choices that you make as an actor are. Those choices are made, and your job is to do what you do in a way that supports choices that have already been made to support a performance that's already been given, really. So it's a lot of fun, and it's very satisfying on a number of levels. But yeah, obviously in particular with these parts, because Cage, how can you not love the guy? He's just a really great guy. He's a great kid.
Now, that's actually very enlightening to me. In fact, I think it's very interesting, to hear this sort of stuff. And I think when we get back, I would actually like to hear a little bit about your live action stuff. But for now, we're going to listen to some Double S 501, only on 91.8 The Fan. Stay tuned.
Bring it.
Ever wonder what's going on in the anime world? Check out 918 The Fan every weekday for the newest iStock. We'll fill you in on everything you need to know in 3 minutes or less. Only on 918thefan.com. Anyway, we're back to Kana's Corner, only on 91.8 The Fan, and we're having this awesome-tastic interview. So awesome, we just don't want to tell you about it. We're just doing it all behind the scenes. I did want to inquire, though, as I said before we had our break, about your live action work, because you came from theater and you've done dubbing, but it seems, in the more recent years you've focused on live action. Is there a reason for that?
I went to Wilmington, actually, Wilmington, North Carolina, which is where I've done most of the anime work that I did, in the pursuit of a Screen Actors Guild membership. This was 1992, 93. So at the time that I was starting to do the work in anime, I was also starting to pursue work as a film actor as well. And I was very, very fortunate. I got the opportunity to do some really fun projects and to do some opportunities to work, multiple weeks on a single film, playing more than just walk-on parts, more than just the, hey, you want fries with that kind of a part. Plot pivotal roles that, had some meat on the bone. And, I have to say, as you said, I came from a theater background for most of my life before that, and I've never left theater. It continues to be something that I'm deeply devoted to. But getting to work in recorded medium and magnetic medium, film and anime as well, was a real eye-opener to me. Obviously, film, one of the great pluses for that is that, you can't beat the money. You can make more money in a day working on a union film than you can make working in 8 to 12 weeks on a play, more than you can make working on an anime title. So while sometimes the work in film is of questionable artistic gratification, there's a lot of logistical and sort of for your own physical well-being, there's a lot of reasons to pursue that work. Now, that being said, I've done a lot of very satisfying work in film as well, and the opportunity to work with some really incredible actors like James Earl Jones and Ellen Burstyn, really just, legends, backbones of the American film industry. When you work with somebody who's just better than you are, it makes you better. And so film is a great medium for really stretching yourself and challenging yourself and growing as a performer. It's also an incredibly technical medium. You have to bring all of this emotional authenticity and sincerity to what you're doing, but there are technical concerns that you have to be mindful of in theater, but it's nothing compared to the technical problems and the awareness you have to have working in film, where if you step a quarter of an inch to the right, suddenly you're out of your light, you're out of focus, we've got to reshoot everything. You just cost us $10,000. We've got to go back, and it's going to take us 35 minutes at least, maybe more, to get ready to do this again. So, when the time comes and they say action, you've got to be ready. You've got to be aware, not just of what you're doing as an emotional, creative artist, but also as a technician. And that's a very challenging thing. So I do love the opportunity to work in film. And there's a lot of similar reasons for why I love to work in anime. That, too, is a very technical process, a very technical form of acting. It's a kind of acting that, frankly, not every actor, whether they be a brilliant theater and or a brilliant film actor, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great voice actor. That requires a unique skill set. It, too, is a very technical form. If you're playing the picture, you're just laser focused on that mouth and the flaps of that mouth. And I know I've got this line that I've got to deliver, and this is the rhythm that I'm trying to get. Scott Hools at Coastal, his goal was always to make it look like, in the end, to make it look like it was animated after the voice actors had recorded, so that mouth just as perfectly as possible matched the sound of the line. So again, a very technical form of acting. But film as well, it can be a very, very satisfying medium. It can be a very frustrating medium, but mostly I think the appeal is just the fact that it's a very lucrative medium. So I feel very fortunate in the roles that I've gotten to play in anime, and certainly fortunate in the roles that I've gotten to play in live action. I do continue to pursue that work, to go after it, but like any industry, it's taken a big hit. There's not as much made-for-TV movies being produced, and there aren't as many feature films being produced. I think we're seeing that's changing, that the economy is bouncing back, that there is more stuff happening, and more opportunities to get out there and work again happening. But it comes and goes. These things are cyclical.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've always heard that voice acting in itself is hard, and getting the part and the auditioning and everything else. And I would assume as well, getting a film part is also highly difficult. But would you say either one is more difficult than the other?
Well, it just depends on where you are. If you're in a market like LA, some people identify themselves as, I'm a theater actor, I'm a film actor, I'm a voice actor. They have these kind of clear distinctions for what they pursue. You're much better off if you can do a little bit of all of it, because it means you're able to go from a voice for a cartoon one week, and then maybe you go into 6 weeks of rehearsals for a play the next, and during that time maybe you get a couple of days on a feature film. If you can kind of cast a nice broad net, then you have a better opportunity, I think, to work consistently. But that being said, if you're in LA, there are 3 million other people who call themselves actors, and there are maybe 10,000 roles being cast in all of these here. So the opportunity to work relative to the number of people who are vying for that work is pretty vicious ratio. That's why, for people who are sort of starting out, I think it is a great idea to be in a market more like Wilmington, North Carolina, where opportunities to work in film present themselves. To work in anime, those opportunities are still there in that community. And while there may be far fewer roles available, there are also far, far, far fewer actors vying for those roles. Ultimately, I like to imagine that the best person for the part is the one who gets the part. But that's, you get the caveat there is that it's the best person for the part who got to audition for the part. So it's not to say there's not 400 actors who might have been much better for that part. They either weren't connected, didn't hear about the audition, or maybe they had an audition and didn't get to make it that day, or maybe the day they went in, you were just off your game. And if you'd come in the next day, you'd have been the choice hands down. But that one day, the voice was off, your head wasn't in the game, whatever. There's 1,000 reasons why you don't get the role. And ultimately, it's kind of a mystery why anyone does. I know 15 actors who also auditioned for Keiichi, and any one of them are great actors that I tip my hat to, and any one of them would have brought something unique, something of their own to the part. I'm not going to stand here and say I think I was the best choice for the part. I think that of the people who read for the part at that moment in time, I was, in Scott Houle and Robert Woodhead's minds, the best actor for the role, and I'll forever be grateful for that. But I'm not so arrogant as to think that I was the best part for the role then, or frankly, now. I really enjoyed Pioneer's work on the Oh My Goddess feature film, and I've heard people say, "Oh, weren't you mad that Pioneer didn't cast you guys?" And it's great to hear the fans of the OVAs be so vehement in their belief that we should have played those parts. But I don't believe that. I think that by the time that was done, Juliet and I had grown to the point where to play parts that young, frankly, we would have had to even further affect our voices. And that removes you an authenticity from the part and requires more acting. And I'd rather be less about acting and more about just being. And, I think Pioneer did a great job with the dub. I think that the actors that they cast were wonderful. And I think that bringing new generations of actors to playing these same parts, if you can imagine, if we retired Hamlet after the original actor who played the part, Richard Burbage, died, we'd have had 400 years of history without that play. So in a similar way, I think, the actors come and go, but these parts go on and on and on and on and on. And we step into kind of a river, a legacy of these roles that I think is very satisfying. And long after we're gone, and long after the generation of actors playing these parts now are gone, new actors there will still be new material, and there will be new interpretations of these older materials. What's really satisfying is just to feel like you're a part of that heritage, a part of that legacy. So, a roundabout way of saying, yeah, it's hard to get the work, and then once you've got the work, it's hard to do the work. But the benefit is that in something like film or anime, is that it lives on. And 20 years from now, people will still be finding Goddess for the first time and watching it for the first time. We get emails to this day from people who said, "I just saw Oh My Goddess, and wow, this was great." And to them, it doesn't matter that we did this 15 years ago. They just saw it today. It just happened today, and that's really, really cool. You don't get that in theater. Nobody ever emails me to say, "Wow, I just saw a videotape of a play you did 20 years ago. It was great." That doesn't happen.
I mean, it's kind of soothing to know that essentially, despite all the reincarnations of Oh My Goddess, you look at it this way, and it helps me sort of as a fan to look at it that way too. Obviously, due to whatever constraints, not only could they not get you guys because they were in another location, it was a different studio, whatever it was, but you were also, how should I say it? You also felt that it was a different reincarnation of Hamlet, as you said, and that's sort of a nice way to look at it.
A different producer has every right to, without getting in the way of the original material, they have a right to make a contemporary personal comment about why they are doing this show. And a big part of what informs that comment is the way you cast it, the way you direct it. That's their right. They paid for that right. And so we have nothing but just kudos for them and the work that Pioneer's done, the work that NYAV did on the TV series. Juliet got to play Peorth in that series, so how fun for her to get to come at the same material from the point of view of a completely different character, and a completely different character from Bill Dandy, So how fun, to get to do that. So we find that even though we may never again step into play these exact roles, our association with this title, it continues and it goes on, even if it's just the opportunity to speak with you, Jackie, and with listeners and fans of the fan about this work 10 years ago. The relevance of the material goes on, and I think that's the great honor of this work is that, oh my goddess, who cares? Subtitle, English translation, Portuguese translation, French, who cares? The point is not the words. The point is these incredible stories and these incredible characters, and the world needs more Belldandy, not less Belldandy. Now more than ever, we need that. We need a good infusion of that goddess of the present, that goddess of love and unconditional love for one another, for her family, for her friends. We all need to bring a little Belldandy into our lives and into our hearts, and I think that's what the world needs right now.
And we're running a little bit short on time, so I do have to get to the nitty gritty. But hopefully there will be more. Oh my goddess! I mean, the manga creator's still going.
They are.
1988, he's still going. Amazing that you can do that.
It's a heck of a run. It's a testament to just the beauty of the storytelling that's going on.
And now I wanted to know, is there any upcoming projects that you would like to let our fans know about?
I'd like to talk about some really exciting projects that we're doing in virtual platforms, and maybe an opportunity to come back and talk with you, Jackie, and with listeners and appreciators of the fan will present itself. We're now not just living in a world of video and audio content, but we're living in a world of virtual content as well. And there's some really exciting things that I'm working with a team of creators on, doing storytelling within virtual platforms like Second Life. That's all very exciting, very cutting edge stuff, and it's something I would love the opportunity to come back and talk with you and your fans about at a later date.
Oh, we would love to talk about it, and we'd love to promote you. Do you have a website or anything, or any links that you want us to know about?
Love to have folks drop by. You can watch my demo reel. You can see my resume and a few pics. We're constantly developing the site, but it's all at Scott Allen Simpson, one word, Scott Allen, ALAN, ScottAllenSimpson.com. That's the website.
All right, and before we let you go, sad as it is, we were wondering if you'd be able to take part in a 91.8 The Fan tradition.
Absolutely.
We were wondering if you would do a bump for us.
Let's do it.
All right, we were wondering if you could say, I am, insert here, I do this, insert here, and you're tuned into 91.8 The Fan.
All right, I'm ready when you are.
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, this is Scott Simpson, voice actor for Keiichi from Oh My Goddess. You're tuned to 91.8, The Fan.
Thank you, that was perfect. And I love this interview with you so much, and I'm sure all of our listeners did. I just have to thank you again for joining us.
Well, you're great, and I really do admire what you guys are doing, and wish you the best of luck, and love to talk to you at any time about any subject.
We'd love to. And now everybody out there, stay tuned to 91.8 The Fan for everything you want to hear and nothing you don't.